All right, Kelly Pavlik, thank you very much for coming on to theboxingbar.com. Welcome, my friend.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Cal, first of all, how are you guys doing over there? My last few guests have been from down south, Southern California, Mexico, Nicaragua, but I haven't talked to anybody going eastward. How's everything going over there in Ohio right now?
It's going. It's getting warm now, and maybe that'll help. I own a personal gym and personal fitness gym, and we're getting ready to open up. We got to go ahead for the 26th, and I mean, for the most part, it came out of nowhere. I mean, we got hit, we got blindsided. Everybody and the entire world did, but it's starting to. I think it's going to be okay. We'll see what happens.
What type of extra precautionary measures are they taking, or are they making you guys be in a gym to before you guys open up?
As much as we can. Again, it's not a personal gym, but it's a fitness center. So we have weightlifters. We range from anywhere with bodybuilders, power lifters, athletes, elder people, young. So it's kind of hard. I mean, because I got a 5,000 square foot gym, but a lot of it's machines and things like that. And so I guess what we're going to do is hard to move them all around, or space machines 6 feet apart. So the precautions we're going to take is we're going to tape off certain machines that leave 6 feet. We're going to spread out the treadmills, the hand sanitizers and detergents. I have a commercial cleaning company who uses commercial detergents. They're going to come in before we open, and then halfway, throughout the first week, and then it'll be my duty to hire, which I already have somebody, but give them extra days to come in and make sure. But I think the big part of it comes down to the individuals themselves.
That's right.
I leave out the cleaning. I leave paper towels and spray bottles. They're all over the gym. And even before this happened, I had them. So it's going to come down to the person to please clean it before and after, a good scrub, and make sure everything is clean also.
Right now that you were saying you had a lot of things going on, I'm thinking of all those Mike Tyson clips that everybody's been talking about doing the mitt work, and I know there was rumors online that you were in talks or in conversations of maybe having an exhibition fight with them. Are those true, false? What can you say about that?
Oh man, you know what? It's crazy how this shit works in the
Yeah,
media and
yeah.
and all this. Yeah, I heard. There was a couple outlets, I guess,
Hmm.
that brought it up. I got brought up to me. I didn't personally hear or see it. But it's a charity event. I wouldn't be, for me, I do enough charity work, as I just mentioned too. I'm
Right.
opening or I already formed, I already got my 501c3
Yeah.
passed and everything for my charitable organization. But if something more of it ever came, again, charity plays a big part.
Hmm.
I'm not a fan of it, nor do I want to. Not that I'm afraid of Mike Tyson, although I respect him. He's a monster. But it's just my time with boxing as far as fighting is done, and I moved on to a different chapter in the sport now. So
Right. Especially with all those things going on with the gym and stuff, you need to concentrate on all the guidelines and all the researching and doing that before you can, jump onto something like this and commit
absolutely,
some of that.
my wife's got asthma, and this virus is tricky. Some people it don't it don't affect, but I can't take that chance with because
Right.
the respiratory and everything else with this virus is pretty
Mm.
brutal. So I got to be careful for just all kinds of different reasons. When I open up my gym, I'm not going to be back there the first 2 weeks. I got my crew on hand that work for me,
Mm.
and they can take care of that part of it, and then we'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's tricky because I'm not worried about getting it. My kids are healthy. I don't think they would be bothered by it.
Right.
But I've also just lost a friend, a close friend who's my age from this virus. He has some underlying health issues, but still, he was for the most part a healthy person, and it took him. So it's tough. It's really a tough situation that everybody's in.
I'm sorry to hear about your friend there. You were born, right, in Youngstown, or were you just raised out of there?
I was born and raised in Youngstown.
What was it like being, raised in a town like that, an old booming town from back in the mid part of the last century? What was it like?
It was cool. I mean, it's definitely changed, but me growing up and even before me, it was just a blue collar area. It was a tough, hard working area, and people worked their butts off. It was cruddy. So growing up here, I didn't have a bad or a rough childhood. I had a very good childhood, but at the same time, I didn't come from money. So everything was kind of like you respected what you did get. My parents, I was fortunate, they made the best of everything for us, but it was an inner city mode that you come in. It's just hard to explain to people that don't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes to show in sports, we have, I think, Youngstown 2 years ago ranked per capita, put out the most NFL players, and he won big college football programs. And, it's just a big area for them with athletes. And I think that comes from just stemming from, we know that nothing's given to you here, in Youngstown. And it makes that person dig that much, or especially the athlete, dig that much deeper. A lot of these athletes don't get help here. They kind of got to do it all on their own and take it into their own hands. Of course, once everybody knows that they're on the brink of making it, then they all come around and want to help. But
Yeah.
for the most part, these guys, they got to do it themselves.
And it makes sense, when you have that much hunger in an individual, you do anything to get out of your situation or to better your situation. That's what makes world champions there. And I have a feeling that was part of your life as well. What were you?
The big thing is, there's a big part with that. I'm sure there's a lot of other places throughout the country, but
Right.
you can't rely on that you're going to get a good trade job or hands-on job or steel mill like you could back in the day. So unless you're a kid whose parents had money and you lived in the outskirts of Youngstown in the suburbs, and you're going to college and you're going to get a degree, or that your dad owns a business and you're going to take over it, it's hard. I mean, and I'm not making no excuses for anybody who don't make it in sports. I mean, I think everybody can find something they're good at and take that to the extreme and make themselves the best at it and be successful. But a lot of these guys, these athletes that have the talent, I think most of them in Youngstown, they realize that other than sports, there's no other way out, So I think that's what really makes them grind and get through it.
What were you like as a kid growing up?
I was shy, but I wasn't shy, if that makes any sense. It's hard to explain. I was a rugged kid. I played in all different types of sports. I played baseball, football, boxing. I started boxing at 9. So I was involved in a lot of things. I didn't have many fights from about 9 years old to 14 because of the time of sports, the other sports taking up my time and everything. But I still was able to excel at all the sports, hardly practicing at all, doing them because of it, just splitting the time up between everything. But then I think right around 14, I knew what I really wanted to do, or 15, and I played baseball, but I quit playing football, and I really focused a lot more on boxing. So I would say from my first amateur fight, which I was 10, almost 11, to 14, I may have had about 15 fights, which is not a lot in the amateurs for those many years. And then after that, that's when I kind of took off on the amateur career.
How was it that you found the sport of boxing, or how did boxing find you?
Again, going back to that, I was involved in sports, and I think, my age group, I'm 38 now, but growing up, it was the Karate Kid shit going on, and I was real big with all the karate movies.
Oh man, trust me, that's one of my all-time favorites.
Retreat. Yeah, No Retreat, No Surrenders, and even some of the early Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. And I was into martial arts, and I was still playing, sports. I mean, I played Kiwi sports. I started out by 7 years old when you're able to start, and I just always go around the house throwing kicks and punches and karate moves. And my buddy, who's like a brother of mine, he's 6 years older than me, but he was my brother Michael's age. They lived in, when you grow up in a city, houses are, you can spit on your neighbor's house.
Right.
So he lived like 3 houses down, and his dad was older when they had him. He had a brother that was my dad's age, and he fought during the World War II times, in the late 20s, 30s, and he had them old boxing gloves. So my brothers, my oldest brother is 6 years older than me, and my middle brother is 4 years older than me. They would all go down in the backyard, and they would go. Louis was going to the boxing gym, and we would get the old cooking timers, and that was the bell, and we put them gloves on and beat the shit out of each other. And of course, I got it the worst because I was the baby, and I remember going home and like hiding the bruises and telling her if they seen it, I would tell them it was from playing rough and tumble or something like that. And I kept asking her about things that they were my parents, and they were like, "No, we'll put you in martial arts." Well, martial arts was expensive, and it was a little too much, and plus it was truly boring. And I went there, for 2 days, and I just did not want to do it. It was torture for me to do karate. And after, I would say probably after a couple of months, my mom and dad were finally like, you know what, we'll let him go. And then hopefully he'll spar, get hit, and want to quit and be done. And we went, and I think I was probably about 3 weeks into it, and they put me in the ring with this kid. And I went in there, and he had probably 5 amateur fights already. And he put a whooping on me, bloodied my nose. And I remember my parents talking that night. They were happy because they thought I was going to quit. And the next day I came home from school and went into my bedroom, and it was a really small house, so my dad could hear what I was doing. I went in there and was putting my clothes together, and I come out with my bag, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm going to the gym to kick that kid's ass." And from that point on, I loved it. I loved the one-on-one aspect. Taking nothing away from the martial arts, just in boxing, I think it's a more hands-on, training and learning. That way, it's kind of like the real life type stuff. And that's where I fell in love with it.
What exactly, like, part of the gym did you fall in love with? What type of stuff did you do to, fall in love? Was it the sparring? Was it the hitting the bag? What did you fall in love with? What attracted you to it?
I think it was all of it. I played team sports, and I was on a lot of successful teams, but there was something about the one-on-one aspect, and I think that's, with fighters, it's not a bad thing, but we're just different individuals than most athletes. And I think that was a big part. I just liked it. Sparring was cool. It was that weird, I guess, the adrenaline rush, as a kid. And I don't care what any fighter says to this day. Anytime sparring or a fight, unless you're sparring a kid that you're absolutely going to whoop up on and can't hurt you, for the most part, you got the nerves, the butterflies. And I like that. And then when I got done sparring, being banged up and sore and bruised up, I liked that. It was weird. Going to school the next day after a rough sparring session and still picking the blood boogers out of your nose, it felt kind of tough. Yeah. But I think that's just everything that came along with the sport. I really liked it. When I say the one-on-one aspect, you win, you celebrate that. You ain't got to share it with nobody. You lose, you got nobody to blame. So that's kind of where it falls.
Youngstown has had, like we were saying, a lot of fighters that's come out of there. Ray Mancini, of course, Lampkin, Harry Arroyo, guys like that. I think there was a guy, Richard, was it Robertson or Richardson?
Yeah, Greg Richardson. He was the WC bantamweight, I want to say.
That's right.
Yeah, bantamweight king.
Did those stories of people when you were going to the gym at the time, stories of these ex-fighters and stuff like that, did that motivate you to keep going and to, go forward and try to make a name for yourself?
That's a good question. And first of all, I just want to say one of my close buddies who I love, the first person I ever met walking into the boxing gym, Jack Lowe, my trainer, wasn't there that day when I first walked into a boxing gym, but Harry Arroyo was. And I walked in and he was like, "Yeah, Jack ain't here." And Harry is just the greatest person, one of the greatest guys I've ever met. And he was like, "Jack's not here." And he was super nice to me. And I didn't know who the hell he was. And I remember leaving, and we get in the car. My mom goes, "Do you know who that was?" I'm like, "No." She goes, "That was the former lightweight champion of the world, Harry Arroyo." And I was like, "Oh man!" And I went back the next day, and Harry was a big part. Watching me come up, I used to spar with Harry. He would work with me as a kid, and then obviously times changed, and as I got bigger, he didn't. But Harry was a super cool guy. But yeah, that was one of the big influences. But I never, as coming up, it was weird. I never really had. You wouldn't walk in my bedroom and see posters of a certain fighter on my wall. I liked certain fighters like Oscar De La Hoya, Toro Gotti, guys like that. Like I really admired and watched, and I liked them fighting, but or I shouldn't say admired, but I liked them. I was a fan of them, but I wasn't like some young kids that have those, Derek Jeters and stuff like that. So I was always kind of weird about that. I was thinking about that not too long ago. I was like, I never really had somebody. I was talking with James Dominguez, and I go, I never really had anybody who I was like, that's my idol. I kind of, if anything, I always took from the top guys I like watching fight. For a little while, I would mock something of Oscar De La Hoya when I was like 13, and then I would get something from this guy. And that's how I kind of just learned and learned about the sport.
While you were saying all that, I'm thinking to myself, like subconsciously, is that maybe why you are how you are? You know how Kelly Pavlik is an approachable individual, and just like Arroyo did for you, it's going to mean a lot to a kid if you take the time and say hi or conversate with them while in the gym. Is that important to you when you think about that?
It is. Unfortunately, you can't talk to everybody. That was the biggest thing I've always tried when I was fighting, when I was at the top. You always try. I never wanted to shy anybody away. I never wanted to turn anybody away, but it is impossible. And sometimes I have to go to the defense of the athletes when I hear people go, this guy's an a-hole because he didn't do this or that.
Right.
And it's just a lot harder than what people think. But I've always tried. I always looked at it like I was gifted an opportunity. And there's not many times that you can have that. Like just not too long ago, the first Triple G Canelo fight. I went to that fight because I didn't go to many big fights. When I retired, I was done. I was, for whatever anybody wants to say, I was just done with boxing for that period of time. I truly was. I was a person who I really didn't start enjoying boxing anymore. Like after I won the title, I was counting down to retirement, instead of counting the next big fight. And, but I went to that Canelo fight, and I thought I was fighting again. I got bombarded. James could tell you it was probably about 2 hours in the lobby at the MGM signing autographs.
Wow.
So very fortunate. And there was a time when I was fighting and I was on top. You would get irritated after a while. Like no matter what you did, every time you turn around, and then when you have that break from it and you go back to it, you find that you appreciate it more. But I always want to be approachable. Like I like talking, especially with younger fighters or athletes, just in general, or people. If they need help with something, or if they got a question, or if they want to talk, I was put in a situation. I was gifted to be able, from the Lord, to be able to be in that situation. I don't try to blow it.
What were your amateur years like in your amateur career? What were they like?
Again, I started off slow. Because of the other sports. But I thought my amateur career was actually pretty damn stellar. I actually, again, after all the years, when everything slows down and you're able to really look back on stuff, I started off and I had probably probably about 25 fights, and I really started getting serious into boxing. And I went in, lost a couple tournaments because I was used to not fighting the tournaments. And I want to say probably 16 years old. 1998 was like my breakthrough year. And I went in, I won the National Junior Golden Gloves. I won the National Junior PAL tournament. And then I went straight into 99 and won the under 19. I really don't think I was in the open division even for a year. Now, I came right out of JO's Junior Olympics, first couple tournaments. I think the first tournament in the open division I lost, and then I know I went on this tear streak, and I won under 19s, which was an open division tournament. I got ranked. I qualified for the Olympic trials. I was me and Stephen Levino, another Oxnard boy.
Yep.
We were the youngest guys, I think, in a long time to qualify at that age for Olympic trials, and it was pretty good. I mean, for me, just going into it kind of cold like that in a heated weight class at that time, I ended up. I mean, I still finished my amateur career with under 100 amateur fights. That's not a lot of fights in the amateurs, and I signed a contract to turn pro in, I think it was March of, so I was still 17, and to turn pro with Top Rank Boxing. So, you know, from the time that I got into the open division out of JOs to the time I turned pro, I don't even think it was a year of me fighting, and I was able to be able to advance the way I did. So it was a pretty good career coming up for those short few years.
If a young kid asks you if it's important to have a good amateur career, what would your advice be most likely?
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. Amateurs and pros is night and day, but it's good just to get that look, to get that different styles of fighters, even though it's for, you know, 3-minute rounds or 4 2-minute rounds, whatever it may be, to get the different looks from all the different fighters. I don't believe in having way too many amateur fights. I think more than 170 amateur fights is too much. I've seen a lot of fighters be burnt out from it going into the pros. But I think it's important. I think it's important for trainers to get their kids to at least 3 national tournaments before they decide to turn their fighter pro. You know, I think anywhere from 70 to 120 amateur fights is good, especially if they're competing at the national level. I think it's important. It kind of gets them, you know, ready for that switch over, gets them a little bit more of experience than what they're going to get. Now, again, when you turn pro, it is a different ball game. You get, you know, the 4-rounders, it might not be that much when you're pro. You're 4, 6, but when you start going into 8, 10, 12 rounds, it's not the same sport as the amateurs anymore.
You made your pro debut in midway through the year 2000. What do you remember about making that pro debut and going to the ring that first day? What was that night like?
It was crazy. You know, we got on TV, swing belt. So it was hot. It was hotter than shit. Palm Springs, California. Yeah. A lot of the guys before me, they had the heat blisters on their feet. I know it was just hot. It was super hot. It was in Indio, California, actually. Right. Fantasy Springs. And I was a very sharp amateur fighter. I was a very sharp at the beginning of my boxing pro career. I was a very sharp fighter. Defense, everything else. I was kind of molded a little bit over time into this power puncher guy. Right. And there's a lot of things I think that play a factor in that. But I started off, I boxed. I mean, I looked like I was still amateur, you know. I carried more of the pro style throughout the amateurs, but you can still see some of the amateur tendencies. And then what happens when you're making your pro debut and you're 18 years old. But I thought it was a good fight. You know, it was, what I say, it was kind of a surprise. We weren't expecting. I ended up fighting on ESPN2, my pro debut, because of the swing belt. And there was a couple knockouts and stuff like that. I believe it was Antonio Diaz undercard. And, you know, it was a good fight. I fought a kid that looked exactly like Mike Tyson. I believe he trained with one of Mike Tyson's trainers. The kid was probably 5'8", 5'9", but he was built like he was a heavyweight. And he had those plain black trunks and black shoes on with no socks. So I was a little nervous, you know. For a debut, first fight without headgear, I was shaking like a dog shitting razor blades. I knew nothing on the guy because they didn't give me no time to, you know, prepare for him. There was no films or access like you have today.
Right, exactly.
And it was a good fight though. I went in there and stopped him with a brutal body shot. So
you're one of those fighters that you had all these KOs, but your body just didn't show it. You didn't look like you had the power to have that strength that you did. Where do you think that power came from?
You know, I tell everybody, it's kind of like the baseball, and that's a really good question. if in baseball, if you're the saying goes, if you ain't got it in the cradle, you're probably not going to have it. And the same with baseball. Like you got leadoff hitters and base hit hitters and guys that are RBI hitters. You got home run hitters. And in boxing, you got guys that can knock you out or they can. You can lift all the weights in the world.
Right.
It comes down to leverage, torque, all those different mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the way sports technology and training is coming, can you turn a guy into a power puncher? I think so. The technology and everything. There's so many arguments I get with people from about old time fighters to today's guys. Just the advancement and everything. These guys today are so much, I think, farther ahead. But it's true. I mean, it comes down to being able to get that. 20 years ago, if you wanted to make a guy a power puncher, and if you couldn't hurt nobody, you would have to kind of start all over with him and reprogram him into being a power puncher. You would have to break down his style and how he throws his punches, how he turns the hip, where he gets the torque at, the leverage. And you can't do that with guys today. It's a long process. And so I think the biggest thing is you either got it, and if you don't have it, then you got to work on your style, and there's something else you got to fine tune what you do have in order to be successful.
Like I said, you had your pro debut in the mid 2000. By the end of 2004, you fight, a guy known to people. His name was Ross Thompson. What do you remember about fighting Ross?
Oh man, you know James, don't you? My partner on my podcast.
I know James. I know Roger too had a little problem with him as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So me and James were just talking about that the other night, and it was actually kind of funny. We were going on, and I guess Ross Thompson did an interview, and I noticed James is telling the truth because this goes back like a while. Ever since I beat Ross Thompson, he was telling everybody he got cheated. Mm-hmm. Ross Thompson was a slick, savvy fighter. He was just one of them guys. He was in there to survive. And anytime you fight a guy that's in there to survive, they're impossible to knock out. I don't care who you are or how hard you hit. It's hard to knock them out. And I beat the living shit out of him for 8 rounds. And what he would do, Ross Thompson has fast hands. So he would be in a peekaboo style, and then out of nowhere, he would throw like a 4-piece combo. And I think he hit me like twice an hour. I think he finished the fight on CompuBox, which I'm not big on CompuBox, but I think he landed a total of like 28 punches the entire fight, which is not a lot. Mm-hmm. And it was a pure butt whipping. And James caught him again, I guess, yesterday on a radio show, telling everybody that he got robbed against Fernando Vargas. And he thinks that they put something in his water against Fernando. He was telling the guy that he beat me, and he don't understand how they gave me the decision against him. And going back to it, Ross is always the same, and it's pretty funny. But no, Ross Thompson, he was a guy. It was a punching bag for me, and it was actually a good fight. See, Top Rank had a little bit of a problem when I was coming up. They wanted to get me rounds. And I understand, because if I have a young kid and he's a power puncher, I do want to see what he could do in the late, growing distance, 6 rounds, 8 rounds. I want to see where his conditioning's at, how he handles it, how he deals with momentum. So that's what Top Rank was trying to do with me. And they put me in there early in my career. I think after when I was 6-0 with 6 knockouts, they put me in with a kid, Robert Soyan, who was from Armenia. A tough guy, and not just a regular journeyman. I mean, he could fight, but the main reason was because he had a chin like Marvin Hagler and Ali put together, in Triple G. He could take a shot. So he was a test for me to go to decision. I knocked him out, probably one of the most brutal knockouts I had. Probably one of the more brutal knockouts in boxing. And it was on one of the De La Hoya undercards. So going into there, they were trying to pick and choose carefully who they could get me in there with that would take me. So then they found Ross Thompson. And this was shortly after he fought Vargas. And, so when I fought Ross Thompson, I knew of him. I knew the fights that he had. But, I thought I expected more. And of course, before the fight, he came in way overweight, loud, everything else. And It was just one of them type fights. Like I know him now, and we're pretty cool. We talk on social media, but it was a fight for me to go to get the experience around him.
About a year later, you fight for the NABF title against a guy named Fulgencio Zuniga. Now, a lot of people kind of remember you from your first world title shot, but anybody that really knows boxing remembers guys like Fulgencio Zuniga. He was a pretty tough dude, Colombian, pretty tough guy. You fight him. What do you remember your fight against Zuniga?
And I'm not looking for any credit, but I was one of the few guys that if they say you're going to fight this guy, I fought him. Zuniga was the type of guy that you weren't going to see too many prospects fight. First of all, he was signed by Top Rank. So that goes to tell you, when you're signed by a big-time promotional company, you could fight. He was 17-1 with 16 knockouts. I don't care how many tomato cans you're fighting. When you're able to knock out 16 of your 17 victories, you could hit.
Right.
So when I went in there, I automatically knew. And Fulgencio trained at Top Ranks in Vegas, and I went to a couple camps and I've seen him in there, and I seen Fulgencio Zuniga like buckle a lot more people in sparring than he did in fights. And it was not timid, but when they announced that fight, I was kind of like, damn, like it's kind of a high risk, low reward type fight.
Yeah.
And for the NABF, and it was a fight, like I said, you weren't going to see too many prospects, fight him at the time that I did. And we went in there, and one thing that we also knew, we knew he hit hard, but we also knew that he was in phenomenal shape. We knew that he was the type of guy that would just keep going and going. I seen him sparring. I mean, he used to spar. He was fighting eight round fights, and he was sparring more than 12 rounds at a time, and just nonstop punching. And then he would get done, and he would go over to the bag, and he didn't move around. He didn't do anything. He was just nonstop punching for 3 minutes on the bag. So we knew that we had to be in tip-top shape also for him. And thank God we were, because, if anybody's seen that fight, it was a war of attrition. And he caught me in the first round. It took my legs, but it was just one of the shots on the button. But nothing where I was, foggy or anything like that. And just came back, and I just think my power and the shots on my punches were the ending factor. If they didn't stop that fight, I don't think he had much left in him. I was tired too, no lie, but I think he was a little worse for wear than I was.
And I had seen both of you guys maybe in a couple of fights each prior to that fight. And then when I saw you guys were matched up, I was like, I think Zuniga is going to probably win this one. And, obviously I was wrong on that. Your next fight, you're defending your new title against a KG veteran, Bronco McCart. What do you remember about that one?
That was a cool one. Bronco was a guy who, just going back on it, who I like to watch fight on. I used to watch his fights on Tuesday Night Fights and everything. And Bronco, at that point when I fought him, he wasn't he was probably a little out of his prime, but he wasn't far out of it. I mean, he was still kind of relevant at that point, and he was slick. He was the type of guy who was dangerous for a young kid coming up. And, and I was a fan of Bronco McCart. But it was kind of weird to, eventually step in there and fight the guy who you watched all the time and you're rooted for. And it was cool. It was a cool experience. Went in there. Again, I just overwhelmed him. He was a veteran. He was experienced. He had tricks. He'd do certain things. But I just think the strength and power and my youth took over in that fight. And it was actually one of the fights. I hope you don't hear this or think I'm being mean, but it was actually kind of a fun fight because that's why I think that started turning to where I knew my chin was solid. I knew I had good defense, for which I wasn't given credit for. I picked a lot of shots off with my hands. And it was just one of the fights where I could fall into my own, stay in the pocket, and I didn't care, and I was kind of having fun just countering him, hitting him with the little body shots and uppercuts and things like that. And that's where, that fight went.
A couple fights up, you fight one of the guys that I was watching, man. I think I don't know how many VHS cassettes I have of this guy. I used to always watch him on the Spanish station, but it was Jose Luis Sertuche. What do you remember about that fight with Jose Luis Sertuche?
Well, if you knew Zuniga and you followed him,
yep.
Well, I already knew a lot about Sertuche because they had war before I fought both of them. Yeah. They did. So I knew Sertuche from that because I watched that fight, and it was a brutal fight. Sarkuchi was another one where I don't think you would have seen a lot of the top prospects take a fight with a guy like Sartucci. Again, I'm not looking for the credit here or anything like that, but they're a dangerous fighter.
Yeah.
That's what he was. And I won't forget that one because at that point, it was kind of almost reverse profiling, I guess. We heard at the time the guy from HBO, we'll never forget, actually Cameron Duncan, who was my agent. He was there and he heard it. My dad, the whole team. I forget the guy at the time that was running HBO Sports, but Cameron goes, when is my guy going to get an HBO date? He's fighting on all these stations. He was a superb amateur fighter. He's signed by one of the biggest promotional companies, and yet he has not been on HBO. And the guy said, we don't invest in white fighters from the Midwest.
Oh,
word for word. So it was frustrating. It really was. And at that point, it was 7 years into my career. My record was unbelievable. The knockout ratio, knockout percentage, of the guys that knocked out, too, that were, good fighters. And Zartucci fight came along, and it was HBO. And HBO said, you're going to fight this guy. You're not getting to pick who you want to fight. This is your opportunity. You better shine. You better go out there and show us if you ever want to fight on HBO again. So you want to talk about pressure, and against a guy who's not easy to knock out. And, that fight going in, it was a good fight. I think that, again, that's where what I was talking about earlier, where I eventually went from a nice slick boxer, puncher, to just a brawler. And that was one of the fights where I fought literally a stupid fight. The game plan for that fight was dumb. And I went in there with a kid who was shorter than me and banged it out with him. Of course, I was the stronger guy who hit hard, and we seen that Zartucci just was not able to keep up with that during that fight. But I think I made that fight a little harder than what I should have made it. I fought at his height, his size, but it was a good fight to be able to go in there and knock Zartucci out, and it wasn't a stoppage or him taking a knee. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a brutal knockout.
You knocked him out while he was standing up, if I remember correctly. And
almost like Mortal Kombat, like to finish him. Finish him.
Yeah, and then you knock his head off, and his body's standing there, but he's out. Know, and I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago, I think I was supposed to have you on, and I sent Zartucci a message, and very nice guy, and I asked him for a quote about what he thought of his fight with you, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something very positive and very nice. And he goes, here, if you're gonna talk to him, can you give him this picture, tell him hi, and sent him this picture. And I don't know if you remember, but I sent you the picture of you and him together. I think it was the day of the fight, after the fight, or the next day or something. But it was both of you guys together.
Yeah, he's super cool. He friended me on Facebook and everything, so I'm cool with him.
Good guy.
He was a tough dude. There's no line about that. Nobody could ever take that from him.
Good guy. And, so now you beat a couple of my guys, and, I'm a little ticked off. And now for your next fight, I was like over here, like, all right, now this is my real guy. This is Edison Miranda. This guy is Mike Tyson of the middleweight division. He's going to be the next big thing. Nobody wants to fight him. Hey, everybody's scared. The Pantera. What do you remember about getting the news that you were going to fight this guy? A very strong, very scary dude in every way. What do you remember about that fight?
Well, if you guys remember, it was super frustrating because if you go back and you watch the Zartucci fight, you'll see at the end of the fight they put that big medal around my neck, and it was the WBC medal. Mm-hmm. That fight with Zartucci was the number one mandatory challenger fight. So after Zartucci, I'm expecting the world title fight now because of the record and because that fight was for the number one mandatory. I'm expecting, and I was told that I got Jermaine Taylor. Well, 2 weeks after the Zartucci fight, I get the call from Cameron, and I'm super pumped. If Cameron's on the phone, he's going to give me the great news. And he hits me with, well, you're not fighting for the world title, but you are fighting on HBO again, and you're fighting Edison Miranda. And you want to talk about being so mad at that point, I could have kicked a box of puppies. I was, I'm going, what else? What else? That's a horrible psych. Like I got to fight this monster, and Miranda was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
People easily forget because of the way I beat him up, but he went in there and he beat the crap out of Abraham. Before that, I watched all the film. Alan Green, who was a really good fighter, he beat him. So going into that fight, man, at that point I really decided that I was like, I'm just not meant to fight for a title, or win a world title. I really thought that 7.5 years into my career or 7 years into my career at that point, and I just seemed like anything and everything that could hit to kind of like throw it off, whether it be not getting the exposure or this or that. So what did I do? I said, F it. It is what it is. And then I think that fight, I think Miranda and the media made me super ready for that fight because they weren't giving me a snowball's chance in hell. And no matter how high my knockout percentage was and how I was running through opponents, Miranda was Godzilla, and nobody was beating him. And then I even remember at the press conference before that fight, Jermaine Taylor or Edison Miranda got up there and he didn't even mention me. He was talking about after he beat me that he's going to fight Jermaine. Jermaine's talking to him. And I'm understanding about, damn, am I even fighting tomorrow? Am I supposed to be here? It's just one of those things. And, I think the game plan for Miranda was to go in, back him up. Don't let him set up. I knew him in my confidence in my head. It wasn't a question of, will I be able to get past Edison Miranda's power? The question was, what is Edison Miranda going to do with my big ass and how hard I hit? And not only how hard I hit, but the amount of punches. I think that's another one that people lose sometimes on with me was how many punches around I averaged. I threw tons and tons of punches around and with power behind them. So, that was my thing. I didn't think that Miranda would be able to hold up with my onslaught for that many rounds in the power.
Did you have in mind, I'm going to just go after him? Or did you have like that in mind of, let's see how he comes first and, we'll go from there? Did you already have a game plan, right?
No, the game plan was to put on the bulletproof vest. We knew we were going to take bombs. We knew we were going to get hit, but it was back him up at all costs because he couldn't punch going out the back foot. If you go back and you watch the fight just, for 2 seconds, put on just the beginning, when we're entering the ring, you even hear the ring announcer say, Pavlik was in a hurry to get to the ring. That was one fight. Like, I'm keeping whatever. It wasn't to be cool or look different than anybody else. I didn't give a shit. Last thing I was thinking about was my image coming down to the ring. But I just knew I was in a hurry. I felt like the quicker I got to the ring, the quicker this fight happens, and my game plan stays intact. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it was to back him up but Edison was not that good off the back foot or moving. To try to box Edison Miranda was different because Edison threw punches from odd angles. I wouldn't say he was sloppy. He just threw them hard punches from all different angles. And I've seen him catch a lot of people trying to outbox him, because Miranda he didn't beat a guy like Alan Green out of just with pure power, Edison Miranda could fight too. He hit hard as hell and he could fight. So our game plan was not to get caught by one of those looping wild punches and go in there and just beat the crap out of him. And then that was the game plan.
Right away, like you said, within the first few seconds, you guys just started going at it. And right away, you were going forward and he was backing up. And he, like you said, he could not fight going backwards. You neutralized his power really quick there. And it showed in every instant. And I think everybody that thought like me was just like in a shock, like, no, this is Edison Miranda. But, Godzilla kind of, didn't, you said he was like Godzilla. He didn't show up that night because, he didn't know what to do.
Because the real Godzilla showed up.
And I think everybody was in shock. And the whole round, like you said, he did not stop throwing those punches. And he was rocked on a lot of instances. The last few seconds of the round, though, the last, I would say 3-4 seconds, he got a few punches on you, and then you walked over to the wrong corner. Were you staggered at that point at the end of the first round?
No, I still don't know because I would remember right after the fight. It was nothing that was on the verge of knocking me out. I mean, maybe it was just the hype of that whole round because if you go back and watch that was just a crazy round one. I mean, it really was.
Yeah.
Um, somebody else was just talking the best round one, and I think that, and I didn't even think about mentioning my fight with Miranda, but now that we talk about it, I mean, what a hell of a first round.
Yeah.
But, I'm going to be straight honest with you. You asked me if that hurt, and my question is, what damn punch didn't hurt that Edison Miranda hit you with? He was just one of them guys. He hit you with a jab and a shoulder. It was you carried it, for 3 rounds. It was just some heavy hands. It's like if you ever played basketball or football with a kid, you hear about like they're strong, but you don't realize how strong. You're like, oh yeah, I'm strong too. And until you get in there, and that basketball guy, you go to the hoop, and he just puts his arm out there, and it feels like a brick wall came out and over and hit you. You're like, damn, he's strong. That's how Edison Miranda was. Like he hit you with a jab or a right hand in the arm, and you're just like, damn. He hit me in the 5th round with like 4 right hands in a row, and it's hard to explain. It wasn't like a dazed out of it, almost about to go down type punch. It was just kind of like my body was just like shut down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't buckle or anything. And he hit me with 4 of them. And I remember coming back to the corner, and Jack goes, "What the fuck are you doing in there?" And I was like, "I don't know. I mean, I didn't want to get hit by those, believe me."
Yeah.
But great fight.
I remember at the end of that first round thinking, since I saw you walk over to the wrong corner, I was like, all right, this is where Miranda's gonna slowly start taking over. Kelly threw a lot in the first round. He's probably gonna tire out, and it's gonna be Miranda from there. But you kept that pace going through the whole round, or all the rounds up until the 6th round, where you dropped them, I believe, a couple times. And at that point, it was like, it's over. It's about to be stopped at any moment. 7th round at the beginning, you take them out. What do you remember right at that moment when you finished?
You see me, after that fight, if anybody watched it, at that point, kind of like on a mission, and I said, pretty much saying, does this prove it now that I'm ready? Can I get my shot now? Is there anybody else you want to bring in here before I can get a shot? That's kind of where I was at that point.
Right.
I was super stoked about it, pumped up that I did what I did, but it was frustrating too. It was. There's no. I knew even at that point of boxing, as I knew about boxing, even after winning the world title, it's a short window, and health and everything else is. I wasn't a Floyd Mayweather, Pernell Whitaker type fighter. I wanted to get in and make the money. My fighting after the Miranda fight or after the Zartucci fight, it was business. I love the sport. Don't get me wrong, and I don't care who gets mad saying, "Oh man, it was all about the money." Because if you ever see me fight, you know that it was about both. You know what I mean? I never laid down or did anything. I always fought my ass off with all the heart and brought the fight to the ring. Mm-hmm. But at that point, like I knew I wasn't sticking around that long. Like I wanted to get in. I wanted to get my title. I wanted to win a world title. I didn't give a shit about a 4 weight class champion or defending my title as many times as Bernard Hopkins did. I didn't give a shit. Like I accomplished a dream, a goal that not many do, and I beat a kid I beat a fighter after to win a world title, who beat the man who set the record for most middleweight title defenses of all time. Mm-hmm. And not only that, I beat that guy, I knocked him out. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of cool at that point. Like this is cool. But the Miranda after that fight, yeah, I was super happy because I proved to the naysayers that I could do it. I proved that I was the real deal, but at the same time, I was like, all right, man, let me get good news now. I better hear good news. So.
And the biggest thing was that you beat him at his game. And that's something that nobody would ever. We would have thought maybe he might pull it off if he wants to box a little bit or move around, but you beat him at his game, and that was phenomenal. And at the same time, also, you showed you had defense, because I think you were a little underestimated there in that defense part too. I think a lot of people
Oh,
don't recognize,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
most people just saw you as a power puncher, knockout artist, but they don't give you that
I always
accolade.
picked off a lot of punches with the with gloves and stuff like that, little quick rolls. That was what kind of my style, especially towards the middle part and end of my career.
And there I go, jumping onto the Cali bandwagon. You proved me wrong all these times, and with my guy Miranda, so now I jump onto your side, and now I'm rooting for you. Plus, I wasn't a big fan of your next opponent, which was for the world title. Everybody's saying, "Well, this is Jermaine Taylor. He just beat Bernard Hopkins a couple times." And by the way, a rivalry of yours in the amateurs. I think I remember you telling me that you guys had
Mm-hmm.
some kind of little rivalry from the amateurs. What do you remember about getting the news that you were going to fight Taylor?
I was totally pumped up. I truly was. I knew I had a hell of a fight in front of me. Sometimes you're hoping that you get that guy that picked up the vacant world title who's very beatable. But no, I was fighting the top dog of the division, and I knew I had to fight Jermaine Taylor. Took a little backlash from everything, but the guy never got a break. He fought Uma, in great shape fighter. He fought Ricky Wright, who's a Hall of Famer, and guys that make you look bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't pay no mind to that, like that to me didn't bother me. I know a lot of the reporters and people I talked to were like, well, are you confident in him coming off these tight fights? If anybody knows boxing, those were super hard guys to fight. And he didn't lose. So, going into that fight, it was just, it was a totally different style coming off the Miranda fight.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was a lot into it. And, I trained different for that fight. I worked on a lot of athleticism as much as I could, and it was just, we knew what we were in for.
After, like, let's say the first round or first couple rounds, what did you see in this fight that you had to do different, or did you see anything that where you can actually pull this off during that time?
You know what? I'm still to this day confused on it. I understand what, the way that some of the people had the scoring. Mm-hmm. I was kind of like with Letterman. I gave Jermaine, obviously, the second round, a 10-8. And then maybe one other round, maybe the fifth, or I can't remember, fourth. But I won the first round. And to be honest with you, that's why I got a little cocky. The first round, I beat up on Jermaine. The beginning of the second round, I was kind of still having my way. I mean, it was more of filling out and everything, but I was landing shots. And then I got caught with a good shot that hurt me, and I did the stupid thing with the tongue, and he dropped me. And I survived that. I was able to punch back as I was, flopping around the ring, but I was holding on. I was punching. There was, Smoger came into the locker room before the fight and said, as long as you show me that you're able to hold on and tie up, I won't stop it. I came out in the third round. I threw 99 punches the round after getting dropped like that. And I knew that right there, that sucked all the life out of Jermaine Taylor that round. And put an ass whooping on Jermaine. And so obviously the second, so when people go, oh yeah, but that knockout, I don't know. Because I didn't see that. I see me totally controlling the fight. I gave Jermaine one round after that second round. And I controlled that fight. So it was kind of weird. At the end of that first round, when I went back to the corner, I was like, I don't know, man. This is not as hard as what people are making it to be.
Well, that's a good thing, guys. You left it off the judge's hands, and you did what you did. What did you think at that point when you had Jermaine in that corner? You were throwing that last combination there. Did you know that it was about to be stopped? Did you know that he was that hurt?
Yeah. I knew with the first right hand. I tell people, it's hard to explain when you fight for a long time, especially being a power puncher. You pick up on it, and it comes with experience. But I hit him with that right hand, and I seen a nervous twitch in his chest, and kind of almost like you see in the body wanting to shut down. That's why I knew I hurt him. It wasn't something. So we're not talking about hurt like ow that hurt. I'm talking about like something with the head, the brain, and it kind of just body let loose a little bit too, and that's when he just stepped back going towards the corner, and then I hit him with that other right hand that kind of finished everything off into the ropes. And then at that point, I knew he was hurt, and that's when he was in the corner, and I was throwing him punches, and then I hit him with the left hook. That you really couldn't see that well, and that was the final punch. That's the one that ended all the things. He just sloped. He went down, and he was out cold from that. So, it was just a great finish.
What goes through your mind, like right at that moment when, way before, the announcers even, announce you as a new champion, but just that moment where it gets stopped and, you just achieve something that you've reached for forever, and what type of things popped in your mind at that moment, if you remember?
Everything. I mean, it's crazy, man. To wait that long and then get what your dream, what you worked that hard for, 7, 8 hours a day of hard training and starving yourself and everything else. It was just kind of like, you did it. You just accomplished something that many do, but at the same time, you don't get it. You know what I mean? It's super hard to explain.
Yeah.
You don't grasp what just happened. A lot of people, I know it took me a couple years to really grasp, like, yeah, I knew I was a champ. I knew that. But to really understand what happened and what you accomplished, sometimes it don't hit, because when you're in that moment and you're now champ, when they say like everything changes in the blink of an eye or overnight, and you could have all the people in the world tell you that it's going to happen, but you can't be prepared for it until it happens. And there were just so many emotions going on. But when that happened, it was crazy.
What was it like when you got back to Ohio? The short ride to Ohio right after that, were you Elvis at that point?
Oh yeah, I mean they gave me a good break and back in. But a lot of shit changed too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of shit changed. It's funny, but it's it was a hell of an experience, man. It really was. And the Youngstown people that made it to that fight was huge. I think there was 6,000. I mean, half the arena was Youngstown people.
Your rematch with Taylor, a unanimous decision. Was there anything you did different for that fight than you did for the prior fight?
Yeah, we worked on. We knew that he was going to change his game plan. We knew that he was not coming to fight the same fight that he did the first fight. So, again, training camp, I took more on myself. I had to, unfortunately, add this into my training. That the work on the athleticism and the footwork and get back to that a little bit. And thank God I did, because we've seen that it was a totally different fight. Jermaine boxed. I had plenty of times I tried getting him on the ropes, and he wasn't having that shit. He had a totally different game plan. But I showed everybody that I could box. I outpointed him. It was just one of them fights. It was a great tactical fight, but I beat him.
That was at the beginning of 2008. Towards the end of 2008, you fight one of the best fighters around at the time before Jermaine beat him, Bernard Hopkins. What do you remember about that fight with Bernard Hopkins?
Now, this is the part where it comes in, and I hate talking about it. Because
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm talking about even the Sergio Martinez one. I think you might be a fan. I love Sergio, but, just truth is truth in the two losses. I could tell you this, for the Hopkins fight, who's an all-time great and taking nothing away from nothing that Bernard has done, but that was not an 80% Kelly that night. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember Thomas Hauser.
A writer?
Big-time writer.
Yeah.
Yeah, he worked for New York. Anyways, Thomas Hauser was a non-biased type guy, though. What Thomas Hauser sees, he writes.
Right.
And he was in the locker room for that fight. It's actually in the book. The book had Ricky Hatton's on the cover. I'll text you sometime the book.
Yeah.
But I had bronchitis going into that. I did. We had injuries in training camp, elbow. Sparring was kind of limited in that camp. But I had almost 101 temperature the night of the fight. And in the book, he even tells you where the commission asked, the doctor asked, or the commission goes, "Well, you prescribed this?" And I couldn't take the inhaler because it was a steroid. So for the drug test, wouldn't pass. So I was on an oral medicine for that fight. And never thinking about it though, because I still felt all right. So warming up, everything else. And then the fight started. I went in the first round, got my ass whooped. Couldn't get moving. The second round, got my ass whooped. Jack don't know what's going on. I tell him, I'll warm up. Give me a couple rounds. I'll get out of this funk. Finally, by the fifth round of getting my ass whooped, at that point, it was, I'm not going to warm up, so I just don't want to get knocked out now, And that was a big thing to go out on my feet. And Bernard's a hell of a fighter, smart, crafty, and it was just, unfortunately, it was not one of my nights. Just, it wasn't taking, again, it's not taking anything away from Bernard. But I know, if anybody who's seen me fight, seen that fight, deep down, I know that wasn't Kelly Pavlik,
And what's sad is that a lot of people don't believe that type of stuff and that happens. If you're around, and I've talked to, current boxers and people from the recent past and people from way, in the past. And there's so many stories like that. And I believe them all, and people,
well,
I think somebody would be stupid to think that every fighter for every fight is 100% at every fight. There's no way. I mean, there's backstories to some of these times,
Well, if you would, let me explain this to you,
mm-hmm.
and this is the gospel.
Right.
Mine is documented
mm-hmm.
in more than one way. The state commission, to this day, if I ask, they could pull that up.
Right.
I'm sure they still have all that shit in there from them fights, and they can see that. But actually, talk about a small boxing community. Who was the co-main event on that card?
Shoot,
Do you remember?
I don't remember. No.
Stephen Levino.
Oh, really? Okay.
And who was?
I didn't know.
Who was Levino's trainer?
Robert Garcia. That was his first world champion.
So, and the first thing when I went to go train with Robert Garcia was the first thing he remembered with me was the fact that I was sick, and Cameron Duncan, who also was Stephen Levino's agent, calls Robert and says, "Hey, listen, can we put this prescription in Stephen Levino's name? It's for Kelly, but we don't want the Hopkins camp finding out."
Really?
And that's exactly what happened. And you can even ask Robert Garcia. Wow. Robert Garcia ain't got no reason. I wasn't even with Robert Garcia.
Well, I just interviewed him on Monday.
Yeah, ask him about that. He'll tell you.
Wow.
So, and Robert won't lie.
No.
You want to talk about another straight shooter? Robert don't lie about stuff. He calls it how he sees it.
Next fight, you fight in your hometown, Youngstown, against a dangerous guy, Veneno, which means venom. Marco Antonio Rubio. What do you remember that fight with Rubio? Dangerous guy too.
A nervous fight. Yeah. Rubio, high risk, low reward type fight. Here was a kid who could fight. Rubio, he went on to win a world title after I beat him like that. He beat knocked out 25-0, 25 knockout Lemieux. And he went on a big win streak after that. I think he won like 9 or 10 fights in a row and won a world title. Rubio could fight. Yeah. He was just a dangerous type guy. And by no means the world's best boxer or anything, but the guy could fight. And it kind of actually surprised me that the fight was as easy as it was. I don't know what the problem was, that he didn't throw much. I was just tagging him. And it wasn't the Rubio I was training for, So
going backwards a little bit, after your fight with Bernard, and a fighter like yourself, that's popular and undefeated and all that stuff, and they get their first loss, what was your mentality there? Did you get kind of unmotivated there for a while? Did you become more motivated? What happens after your first loss, or what happens to you after your first loss?
To be honest with you, and again, there's always everybody's fucking speculations and then their reasonings. After the fight, it didn't. The loss to Hopkins, because I knew exactly that what happened that night. That was not me. To be honest with you, if I was 100% that night and I got my ass whooped like that, yeah, you better believe that I'm going to have, it's going to be hard for me to swallow. But after the Hopkins, it wasn't. I mean, he gave me some, words of wisdom after the fight and pep talk a little bit. He was super cool about it, and I went on. I just went on about my way. And again, obviously it didn't affect me that bad to go in there against a guy like Rubio and put on the performance I did. It was what it was. I mean, it wasn't the first time I lost, in my life. So it wasn't that big of a factor. I mean, I just went on my regular way with it. One thing is a lot of shit don't get to me that much. It is what it is, kind of is how I always go about.
And after that Rubio fight, you fight another guy in Youngstown as well. His name is Espino. You get that victory by knockout. Your next fight over, I think, is another fight that you were saying that you don't like talking about, which was the fight with Sergio Martinez. Going into that fight and with a guy like Sergio Martinez that was well known and he was considered one of the best, if not the best at that time. What do you remember about that going into a fight like that with Sergio Martinez?
I knew I was fighting a fantastic boxer. I knew that going in. I was super confident in that fight. The only thing is, don't know what the hell happened overnight for me to make weight. It was, I don't know if it was being 28, almost 29 years, almost 30 years old, trying to stay at 160. Again, I know this sounds like making an excuse because I lost, but reality is reality, and even the commentators on HBO mentioned during the fight about my weight issues and going up to my hotel room and the stationary bike, and which to this day I wish I could go back and change the people I had fucking on the team, because knowing that the minute they said they were coming up to the hotel room to do the interview, somebody should have did some shit with the treadmill and the stationary bike, because that's information you don't want the other camp finding out, and you better believe the other camp is going to find out.
Oh yeah.
So that was to this day the one thing that I truly get so pissed off about is that to make the weight it was fucking brutal. I don't know. Nothing really changed that much in camp. I don't know if it was just my body saying like, hey, you're almost 30 or you're almost 62. Like, maybe I should have moved up a fight before or whatever. I don't know. Again, I did also fight Jermaine the second time at a catch weight of 164, but it was brutal trying to make weight for that fight. We woke up the morning of the weigh-ins and I was still 4 pounds over. And thank God they were a little later weigh-ins. And most that morning, I go in the sauna. I was in the sauna for 10, 15 minutes. You're supposed to sweat. Not even a bead of sweat came out of my head. So with that being said, going into the fight kind of turned out how I expected the fight to be. It was me trying to figure out his movement, because I'm not taking anything away from Sergio Martinez. He was a phenomenal fighter, hell of a boxer. And, and of course, all the rumors, I wanted to prove everybody wrong that I could box. So after the Hopkins fight, everybody was like, well, there ain't no way he's going to handle a boxer. Mm-hmm. Well, I proved everybody wrong in that fight, too, though, because if you go back over it, going into the 9th round where everything changed, I was ahead on points. Those middle rounds, I took over the fight, and it was actually fairly easy at that point for me. Now, being outclassed, that's not being outclassed. You know what I mean? I was winning that fight. 9th round, people want to say it was cut. Well, first of all, the cut was the reason why, the way it was, because of dehydration and rehydration. That's why it bled the way it did. Secondly, if I got cut or not, the same outcome of that fight was going to happen. The reason being is because I hit a wall in that 9th round. My body, I wasn't tired lung-wise, cardio-wise. I wasn't like I was trying to catch breath. I'm not tired that way. My body, like lethargic, just hit the wall. Like said, I'm zapped. Like all this shit just happened. I ain't got it. And that's pretty much what it was in that 9th round. So close to cruising on. If I would have won another round or two, I won the fight. Unfortunately, and taking that away from Sergio, because Sergio capitalized on that. He took advantage of it, and he fought, and he's a great fighter. And then that was exactly what happened with that fight.
At that point in your career, like in 2010, like when that fight happened, at that age, were you after fights? Were you like going up a lot in weight, or you're walking around weight? Was there a lot of fluctuation in weight there, like between fights?
Yeah. Oh, I stayed. I always kept my weight. Uh, Maybe a little more. I mean, again, it's science. The body gets bigger as you age. I was usually walked around 177, which ain't that bad for a 6'2" middleweight.
After that fight, that was in 2010. About a year later, you don't fight for like a year. You fight one time, and by the next year, you decided to leave Ohio and come to Southern California to train with Robert Garcia. What was that time like when you went from your longtime trainer Jack Lowe to coming to California and training with Robert Garcia? What were some of the big differences from the camps?
That was kind of the beginning of the end right there.
Yeah.
You know, with Jack, throughout all my career, pretty much top rank wanted Jack on it. I fought tooth and nails to keep Jack. Again, this is all true things that I bring up because everybody knows me knows I don't lie. 2002 or 2003, Top Rank sends me out to Vegas to train with Pat Berry. And actually, it was supposed to be Kenny Adams, and I guess I forget somebody around didn't want me with Kenny Adams, so I ended up going to Pat Berry's gym without Jack. I put up a fight. I argued. Finally, 2 weeks later, they send Jack out, and he's still my trainer. 2005, that fight, I go out there to re-sign my contract because it was the 5-year deal, and it was up with Top Rank, so I go out to renew it. They take me to the Castillo-Corrales fight, and without Jack, and we had meetings on leaving Jack, and going with somebody else. So throughout the career, that's what it was, and I was loyal as shit. I mean, I almost put my career on the line, the pull to keep Jack. Finally, 2010, 11, whatever the year was, Top Rank calls me and says, "Hey, you got to go to New York." So we go to New York, and at that point, to be honest with you, I'm done with the sport. I made the money. The hunger is not there. Again, not because of the Hopkins, not because of my personal demons. I was just a guy like Robert Garcia who didn't want to fight forever. Like, a lot of guys who retire young. It was not, I was kind of like done with the sport. They tell me that I got to go to California and train with Garcia. And that's when all the shit back home with Jack starts flying off that, he was kind of pissed off. And I did tell Jack that I was going to New York. Anyways, it was just a little incident, and it almost ruined a friendship with me and Jack. Thank God to this day, I'm still cool with him, and he's a great guy. But I go to California. So at that point, I'm talking to the wife, the kids, the family. I'm like, this is bullshit. I shouldn't have to leave home. Usually, you have to leave home at the beginning of a career when you're trying to become a world champion. You don't leave home when you got millions of dollars in the bank and 3 world titles sitting in your trophy case, and you're almost 30 years old now. Mm-hmm. But I did it, and I went to California, and then I will tell you this: that what a awakening that is. It was truly, because at first I was like, what more am I going to learn? I've been pro almost 13 years. I got 3 world title belts. I've seen it. Like, what are you going to show me that I don't know? Well, Robert didn't show me anything crazy, but it was just something different, man. And Robert, when I got out there, it was neat. It was cool, and it was fun. It was a great time. Everybody out there was just awesome, and it was great. I mean, I learned a lot, but nothing to do with Robert or anybody else. But I get out there, and I fight Aaron Jaco. I fight Scott Sigmund, Will Rosinski, and it's really hard when you're already, kind of don't have it anymore for the sport, to kind of go away from home. And at that time, I left too. I mean, I was gone for like 3 months straight. I had 2 young babies at home. it was tough. It truly was. It was really hard to get motivated for those fights. Even though I think I was at my best going into them fights with the two moves of Robert, but just one of them, it was a totally different situation. Crazy.
And there was a planned fight for a nice amount of money with Andre Ward when you decided to go ahead and retire before that fight happened. What exactly happened there during that time? You had that planned fight, and then it didn't go through. What happened?
Yeah, well, that was the icing on the cake. That fight right there, that was the stamp on retiring. Um, Again, everybody said that it was me that made the choice to retire and pull out of the fight. And I don't understand how anybody could get that because that's when Andre Ward ended up hurting his shoulder and he had to get surgery and he was out. So I did cancel the fight. I was totally fucking pumped up for that fight. You want to talk about getting motivated again and getting like that second wind and that being revived and wanting to fight? Hell yeah, Andre Ward. Fuck yeah, I'll fight him. One of the greatest. What a way to go out on my career.
Right.
A guy like that. I was pumped. I was super pumped for that. And then when Andre Ward got hurt and then had the shoulder injury, and they actually pulled out, the negotiations no longer were on the table, I was done. I was done with the fight. That will kind of just really zapped everything. Again, going back to it, I told my wife at the time in 2007 because my parents, they didn't want me in the sport long. She didn't want me in the sport long. She's not taking to say anything mean about it, but she wasn't like Pacquiao's wife or anybody like that where, or Donaire where they want that light. For us, like I said, I was counting down to retirement after winning the title. And that was kind of the icing on the cake at that point because also, and it was hard. I mean, that retirement, I knew the consequences of retiring that young. I knew that there was going to be shit. I knew there was going to be rumor after rumor and everything else. But, it is what it is. I had peace ever since. I mean, that's the one thing in my life where I could sit back now with a record of 40-2 instead of 40 or 41 and 8 or 9. Mm-hmm. I could sit back and say, you know what, it was smart. I mean, to be able to have the investments now to do whatever I want on my own time. Mm-hmm. Go to my gym that I own. If I want to walk in there at 10 o'clock, scratching my nuts, I can do it. If I want to go, a podcast, whatever, it's on me. And that's why when I retired, there was a lot of things that came into play before I made the announcement. I looked at the super middleweight division. I looked at because I really tried prolonging the retirement too. I'm going, okay, who can I fight then? Okay, if I can't fight Andre Ward, who is somebody for me to go out there and fight now? Because at that point, after 3 fights that I had, or actually 4 that I had, I don't even think networks or anything really wanted to, carry or would have carried another one of my fights. It was kind of like go hard or go home. And I'm looking for who I could fight. And every time I brought up a guy, no, that one ain't. He's tied up in the Super 6. And yeah, well, you ain't going to get this guy for another year and a half. So I kept saying, well, so does that mean I go back out to California, all the way across country, which I had fun, loved it out there, but for another 2.5 months, train and fight this guy, so-and-so. I really broke it down, and then there was nothing on the table for me anymore in that sport. There was no meaningful fight anytime soon, and at that point, that was it. And people could carry whatever the hell they want, say whatever the fuck they want to say, but the truth be told, that's exactly what happened. It was just time. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And like I said, going back over to this day, I don't have any regrets about the decision that I made. Obviously that's why I haven't come back. I mean, how many fighters have you known to retire that young and you see them fighting 2 years later again? So that goes to show that, I have my shit together for no matter what's being said. Obviously, it wasn't as bad as what people were making it out to be because I would have been fighting again, or I'd be working somewhere right now. I wouldn't be owning, businesses or anything like that. So I was fortunate. I felt like, I was blessed and given the opportunity. I think sticking around any longer than what I did would be selfish to my kids, my family. To me, so it was just a lot that came in on that decision to retire. But once I made that decision, I made sure that I was 100% committed to it, and I was.
I hope anybody that had a question in their mind of what happened to Kelly Pavlik kind of listens to all that you just said. I think you told me a little bit about all that when I talked to you a couple years back. At that time there was that incident like where you had like a seizure, or something like in court, and people in the media, especially, they were talking about Kelly Pavlik like he was going down by the minute. He's just this partier that's going down, hard. And was that ever like anything that like in your family that people that knew you that they were worried about, or did they know the truth? It was this just something that was taken by the press and the media, and they took it to another level for obviously themselves.
The media and press took all my shit to another level. I mean, dude, let's be honest. We've seen, and this ain't like me playing victim. This is like me telling the truth.
Right.
We've seen shit that Kovalev has done. We've seen shit Kovalev has done in Oxnard. We've seen Broner. We've seen fighters like go out and be involved in shit that you would never believe. I'm over here, BB gun, 4-wheeler, pity pat shit. Right. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, pity pat. That was actually blown up because of Youngstown. And to this day, I don't get it. You don't hear Kelly Pavlik getting caught with 20 pounds of fucking marijuana or cocaine or Kelly Pavlik robbed a convenience store.
Right.
You hear BB gun on a bullshit story.
Right.
Okay, yeah, but the kid was at my house. It wasn't an assault. He was hammered, supposed to be working on the pond, and we were playing around, and he stayed at my house 2 days after that. So it's easy to take them. So, but going back to the original question with the court thing, yeah, my family was. I can't, I won't sugarcoat that. They were, for a period of time there, concerned. The seizure was not from boxing or anything else. What happened with that one was, and I'll be dead honest, I go out to Vegas. We go out there, me and a handful of buddies. We go for like 3 days, and it's having fun, I come back, and we had a court date for another stupid, childish, petty little incident. And, yeah, you know what? Because of my actions and taking the fun to an extreme, I ended up having like a DT, from that. And that's what happened. It was nothing else as far as boxing or anything else. And shortly after that, though, that's when I kind of like had to start pulling my shit together. And, that at that point, like the fun, it wasn't doing no good. It was at that point, it wasn't even about reputation anymore. You know what I mean? It was about like, Kel, you got to pull your shit together. And at that point was when I did. That's when I said, all right, well then let me start doing some shit. So I went out and bought a gym. I went out and invested into another business. Then, with James, I said, okay, let's do a podcast. And, that's been quite an investment. And, but it's fun. And we get to go on these big fights and everything else. And, process of opening the boxing gym, the charitable organization, the all sports testing that we're getting ready to do throughout the country. Mm-hmm. There's just so many things now. And, yeah, at that point, it just became to a point where a lot of stupid little incidents that were stupid and childish, but they were just starting to happen a little too often, and one part of me, like, nobody else would ever have gotten in trouble for that shit. You know what I mean? There wouldn't even have been a cop called. And then, let's be honest, let's call Bluebird, especially in this area. You don't get in trouble for that shit. But being a big name and in a small area, you do. And again, that's why I say it's like you hear some of these things that these athletes get in, and you hear mine, but it turns out that I'm the biggest screw up than anybody, and I don't get it. But at the same time, that you're in that situation. You know what I mean? The spotlight's on you, and yet you keep finding yourself in these little incidents, and it just came to a point where it was totally not worth it anymore.
anybody that was worried doesn't need to be worried anymore. You know, the way you look, you're in shape. You know, you look like a bodybuilder yourself today. All these
Yeah.
projects that you were talking about at the beginning of the interview, you know, with you opening a gym, thinking of opening a boxing gym, you know, somebody that's broken down and out doesn't do that stuff, you know, and your podcast, like you said, going
I
on.
know. Like I said, you're not getting in trouble for me because if it's that bad, you're not getting in trouble for a 4-wheeler lamppost. You
Yeah,
know, it's
exactly. Yeah, and so you know, it's a good thing, man. It's not a sad ending to a real story. It's a good.
could have been no. It comes down to my thing for people is you got to pull your head out of your ass.
Yeah,
And that's what I had to, you know, because
yeah.
it could have, you know, for a little while, it could have been that story, you know, the
Mm.
story that we don't want to hear.
Well,
So
that's a good thing you changed there. Looking back at your career today, you know, and thinking back, and I think you brought it up a little bit right now. How do you see your career? Do you look at it and say it could have been better? Do you look at it and you're content with it? Are you happy about it? You know, how do you grade your own or review your own career looking back?
I look at it, you know, I'm not going to be a person that's going to be like, I should be in the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to be a person that says I should be top 20 middleweight of all time or top 10. My stats, I have some good accolades. I believe I rank up in 3, maybe in knockout percentages, and I think I'm pretty high in average punches per round. But there were some things in my career. You know, there was a lot of things I wish could have happened. I wish it was some bigger fights. I ain't gonna lie about that, and I wanted them, but it wasn't the way it turned out to be. You know, and that comes down to the guys up top. You know, the promotional teams, and a lot of fighters get blamed for that, and they don't have a say in it. And some of it that top rank did, I don't blame them. You know, especially like Sturm, Felix Sturm, and Abraham. Um, I don't blame Top Rank. You know, they were demanding a lot, and they wanted us to go there as being the lineal champion of the weight class. Um, you know, obviously the Hopkins and Martinez. If there was some things that could have changed about it, absolutely. Hopkins at that time of my career, you know, some of the things that we could get into. You know, the Paul Williams fight at around that time, staph infection. A lot of things were hitting with that, and if I would have took another Gary Marcus type fight, especially after the Paul Williams fight, because both me and Paul were both getting shit for that, and it came down to just a disagreement between DeBella and Top Rank. Believe me, who would I have rather fought? Paul Williams coming up from welterweight or jumping up 2 weight classes to fight Bernard Hopkins? Well, it probably took the chance with the Paul Williams fight. To me, Paul Williams was a great fighter, but not overly powerful. He was just a guy who threw a lot of punches around.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? So did I. And I had a lot of power and everything behind my punches. But when those fights fell through, the Hopkins fight was brought up. And if halfway through camp with all the stuff that I had going on, or just say 4 days before the fight, or 3 days when I got diagnosed with bronchitis, if I would have time out, well, we got to push this fight back, the backlash would have been horrific. You know what I mean? It would have just been worse than the loss, I think. To this day, you know, I know it would have been. So we took that. So yeah, to this day, I look back, I go, well, should I have done something different? Should I have postponed the fight? You know, that always plays in my mind. But and then the Sergio Martinez fight, a lot of it is, well, if I come in 2 pounds heavier, or if I come in a pound and a half, because believe it or not, a pound and a half is a difference of 4.5 hours on a treadmill and a steam room. Do I do that? And you know what? Strip my belts, because that actually was something that we were thinking about when that fight happened. We were saying, should we just come in a pound and a half heavy? This is the last fight at middleweight, so what does it matter? You know, take the belts, strip me of the belts. I'm done anyways. But I know the backlash I would have took for that, you know, and I know that's just not fair or right to do that. So, you know, yeah, I'd be lying to you if I was to say, like, I don't think about those things. But I think what really makes me able and satisfied with my decision is the fact that I lost to 2 Hall of Famers, 2 all-time greats, and that was it. Not only did I beat some guys, I destroyed them. You know, not only did I beat Edison Miranda, who was at the time a dangerous guy, I destroyed Miranda. I knocked out Taylor. I beat Bronc McCart, who was a former world title challenger. I destroyed Rubio, who was a world champion after I beat him, and a contender before I fought him. I think there was like 4 or 5 world champs that I fought. So yeah, overall in my career, I'm satisfied with it. Nothing that way I look backward. It makes it hard for me. I feel proud to be able to say I was 40-2 with 34 knockouts.
We brought up your podcast a little bit ago. That podcast Punchline with James Dominguez. It's kind of pretty refreshing to know that there's a podcast out there, with the next world champion that's giving us a rundown and giving us his thoughts. And in this case, it's Kelly Pavlik. What can you tell us about your podcast? When can we catch it? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, that it came up. Me and James like to talk a lot on the phone. And James ended up moving to Ohio first of all, he had family in Columbus and kids and everything, and then he came up this way to Youngstown, and we were just sitting around one night, talking, and we got to thinking about it, and we're like, why don't we just do a podcast? Because the amount of time we sit here bullshit about fights and boxing every night, to just do a podcast where everybody else is involved, And at that time, there wasn't many fighters doing podcasts. I think it was just Paulie and maybe one other. And I was like, let's do it, And at first, it started off like, all right, we'll go the cheap route too, because I just bought my fitness gym. I had another investment that I was doing. I have another gym they're doing fantastic, but I'm more of the guy who just helps bring people in. So I'm all over. And then, I was getting ready talking with Billy. We were talking about doing the app, which I do finally have now, but it was a long process before we even got the app. And now that we're just new with the app, that's still even more of a process. But there was just so much going on. So I was like, all right, listen, dude, spread thin. I'm renovating this gym now. I go, what are we going to do? Like, we have to set a budget. And it turned out to be like that. Yeah, we're going to just spend we'll spend like $500 on this. We'll get some cheap equipment. Well, a lot of money later, I'm like, oh, it's a fun podcast though, right? It was a lot more expensive than expected, but it's fun. I think the format of the show, where the listeners are able, it's funny about it. We brought on Crawford, Mikey Garcia. I mean, you name it. We had some of the top fighters, and we actually lose listeners when we bring people on because of the format that we set the show up with. So the format, pretty much, if anybody tunes in and watches it, you may say, what the hell is this? Because both of our heads are down on our phones. But what we're doing is we're reading everybody's questions, and we try not to miss anybody's. And we reply back to it. No matter what their comment or question may be, we reply back. And these listeners love that. They don't care about what top fighter is on the show doing the interview. They just want to be heard, and they want to be able to speak their mind. And it turned out, that format, people like it. And it's been fun. But yeah, you can catch it. It's the Punchline with Kelly Pavlik and James Dominguez. And obviously right now we may do a show this Sunday from home, but usually it's Sundays at 7 o'clock. And I think when all this COVID stuff starts clearing up, we'll be back in studio doing it.
I'll be checking it out.
Find it on YouTube or Facebook, live. We do that. They can go to punchline.live and they can find all of our past interviews and shows if they want to, watch that. So
awesome. Well, a question I ask everybody at the end, Kelly, once it's all said and done, even though you're going to be here for another 100 years, how do you want to be remembered to everybody? What I call the 3 big F's: your fans, your family, your friends. How does Kelly the Ghost Pavlik want to be remembered?
That's a good. For who I am, a good person. I hate saying that because it looks like I'm one, but I do a lot for people, and I do it under the radar. But I go about, I just go about doing my thing. I don't go out of my way to bother nobody. But for as far as fight, I was a guy who went and I entertained. I gave it everything I had in the ring. I tried not to leave a dull moment, and I think that's where a lot of the Mexican fans picked up towards the end with I think because of my style. But you know that more than I do, though. I think I had a lot of Mexican fans. I did. I wouldn't. It was balls to the wall type fighting, and that's kind of in my life, my personal life, I'm kind of like that. But now, as I mature and got everything else going, and my kids are older now, it's kind of the same way. Like, I'm just very dedicated. So right now, I got a lot on my plate as far as businesses and everything, and it's great. It's fun, and but I'm really competitive even with myself. So like my gym, it's got to be the best. And I wanted this boxing gym. I don't want the rinky-dink Rocky Four gym on the corner. I want a laid out gym, and I don't care what the old school people say. Like it's got to be rugged and it has to be this. That's horseshit. You don't have to be. So everything I do, it's a challenge. I make it a challenge. It's fun, and again, it's at my own time on my own page because I'm able to do that. But at the same time, I still put a lot into it, and that's how I am. That's my life. It's go hard or go home.
And that's a great thing, Kel. And I'm just glad that everything's going great for you. And when I think of you and your career, I think of some of the last like real time that I really enjoyed boxing is during that era in the sport. Watching guys like yourself and all those guys, some of the guys that you mentioned there, and I miss that time. And you had a great career, and I think you're doing greater things today as a human being and for others, man. And you can't go wrong doing that. Every time I think of you, personally, I think of nothing except positive stuff, and I appreciate you for everything you've done for the sport, for what you're doing today, for others, and for coming on here to theboxingbar.com. And I appreciate all your time, man. Thank you very much.
Hey, man. Thank you. I appreciate it. It was a great interview, man. I enjoyed my time.
All right.
So I appreciate it.